Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be all of my non-sci-fi and fantasy favorites for 2019. So there's like a mashup of various genres here. So again, I'm just going to do kind of brief overviews of what they're about. Obviously I loved them, so definitely recommend picking them up. So I think let's start with our favorite romance and contemporary first. So the first one I think I'll talk about here is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. So this is like an enemies to lovers romance where our main character Olive is a twin, and she's kind of like the unlucky twin. Basically everything in her life seems to go wrong, but so her twin is the lucky twin is getting married, and in her wedding everybody ends up with food poisoning except for Olive, the main character, and the best man Ethan, who Olive kind of hates. Since they're the only ones who didn't suffer this food poisoning, Olive's twin sister is like, there's this honeymoon that's been paid for, you guys pretend to be us and just go. So they go to Maui on this honeymoon, which that was what really drew me in here. I really love Hawaii, so any sort of Maui in particular, so any book that really has this like Maui or just generally Hawaii setting, I'm definitely intrigued by. They pretend to be newlyweds and like go on this honeymoon. Olive realizes that she doesn't really mind pretending that she's married to Ethan. Obviously there's like some drama that develops. It was just absolutely wonderful. Again, I really loved the setting. I thought Olive was hilarious and I loved the romance, so I definitely recommend this one for sure. This was my first experience with Christina Lauren, and now I've kind of like bought several more of their books, and I just like really can't wait to see what else they have. So on that note, the next book I'll talk about is Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren. So this is, again, like an enemies to lovers type romance where our main characters meet at a Halloween party. They both work as like film agents in Hollywood, I think, and they work at competing firms. So their agencies end up merging, so they essentially have to fight for the same position. So at this Halloween party, they start to hit it off, but then, you know, having to compete for the same position, they start kind of like trying to sabotage each other. It's actually like pretty funny and not super malicious, but we definitely have some drama in the workplace, not only because they're competing for the same position, but just generally like the boss is kind of like a sexist jerk. This was like a really enjoyable, funny enemies to lovers romance. So generally speaking, I think both with Dating You, Hating You and The Unhoneymooners, it's like really entertaining dialogue and the characters are just really relatable, I guess. And, you know, I just enjoy seeing the banter that occurs between the love interests, and, you know, there's some kind of like more serious topics addressed in both of these books, but yeah, it's just really wonderful and definitely recommend this. The next book that I'll talk about is Well Met by DeLuca. So this is another enemies to lovers romance. Have we guessed that I like this trope? So this is set at a Renaissance fair, and I did read it before going to my local Renaissance fair, and it just made it so much better. So I do suggest, if you like have the ability to read it around a Renaissance festival, then you should, because it just makes everything so much better. But anyway, our main character Emily moves to this really small town in order to help her sister out, but she ends up having to volunteer because her niece needs like an adult supervisor to volunteer with her for this Renaissance fair. Simon, who is, you know, we can all guess is going to be the love interest here. It's this Renaissance fair is like, he's in charge of it and wants everything to be perfect. He like kind of doesn't love how Emily is trying to change things up, and you learn more about like why he's so resistant to these changes. When they're actually at the Renaissance fair, he plays a pirate and, you know, kind of flirts with Emily's bar wench. I loved the characters. Again, there's like really witty banter and just, I don't know. It was just funny. I cared about them. I cared about the romance. And again, I really love this Renaissance festival setting. So definitely recommend this one for sure. The next book I'll talk about is Evvie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. So this is maybe more contemporary than romance. I don't know. Our main character Evvie was recently widowed, and she like puts up part of her house for rent, and the friend of her best friend needs a place to stay. He is like a baseball pitcher and kind of has the yips, so he can't really pitch anymore, so he just needs a place to kind of reset and like regroup and, you know, gather himself. So he ends up living in this like apartment in her house, and they kind of make a deal where they're both like, we're not going to ask about each other's problems and just generally be friends and avoiding talking about these serious subjects. But obviously, like, things start to happen, and their friendship starts like developing a bit more, and they kind of push each other to change in good ways. So it's a lot about like finding yourself. I read it at the perfect time, and I really liked the characters. I liked this friendship that develops between them, and, you know, like, kind of develops from there. I really like this baseball aspect because I'm sure several of you know I do play softball, so I really love seeing like sports that I play represented in books. But yeah, so it's just like a really charming, feel-good type book, and with like a deeper message, I guess. So the next book I'll talk about is 1 Week Till Christmas by Belinda Missen. So this is one that I talked about fairly recently on my channel. Our main character works as like a travel writer and doesn't really love her job, but she literally bumps into this guy that she is later called in to interview because, you know, I can't remember exactly what it was. There was some sort of like cancellation, and she's called in to interview this guy that she bumped into. So there's definitely some chemistry that develops between them, and there's, you know, drama happening. So this is like a, you know, a Christmassy romance. So definitely it's good to read around that time. She has about a week before she has to fly back home. So they kind of have to determine, like, is there something more between them or what? Because there's this limited time span, and, you know, there's some misunderstandings that need to be cleared up, but it was just really charming. It was really funny. I was definitely reading for the romance. I really liked the main character, Isabel, and just, yeah, the romance was lovely. I liked the setting. I did read it before Christmas, and it just got me in the Christmassy mood. So those are all the romance and contemporary books that were 4.5 or 5 stars. So now let's do mystery and thriller. So I only have 2 books to talk about here. So the first one is Water in the Woods by Kelley Armstrong. So this is like the 4th, I think, book in this Casey Duncan series. But there's essentially like a secret town where people can pay to go and like live anonymously if they're in trouble, you know, if they're like trying to evade the law, or if they're in danger from somebody in their life. So Casey in the first book goes with her best friend because her best friend is like trying to escape her abusive husband, if I'm remembering that right. So Casey ends up being the detective for this small town. There's a lot of like murder happening and crimes that need to be solved throughout these books, but here a marshal shows up looking for one of the residents and like won't say who it is. So Casey and the sheriff are kind of like, I don't know about this, but the marshal ends up being shot and killed. Casey's sister, who's a doctor, like has to be smuggled in to help with like this medical emergency. Casey essentially has to solve the case of like who murdered this marshal and why was he murdered. Got to stop a killer and figure out who he was actually in town to get. But yeah, so I think these books are really fun to read during the winter. So this takes place in the Yukon. It's a really great mystery thriller series. Definitely recommend it. The next book comes out in February, so I'm very much excited for that. Alright, so the next book we'll talk about in this category is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. So this is actually published, I think, everywhere outside of the US as just the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, so that's just kind of like an interesting footnote. Obviously, Evelyn Hardcastle has died. Our main character has to identify her killer day after day, and there's, you know, he has 8 days to do it, and each day he inhabits a different person. So there is like a little bit of a sci-fi element since he is waking up in a different body each day, but you know, so he takes on his host personalities and has to kind of use their different skills in order to solve this murder. So this was very fast-paced. It was super interesting. I just flew through it, and I won't say more about the plot because it's something that you should really discover for yourself. But yeah, this was an unexpected surprise, and I really loved it. So now we go into favorite action and adventure. So the only book that I will talk about for this category is Crucible by James Rollins. So this is some number of book in the Sigma Force series. But this is kind of generally like a blend of mystery, science, and action. So it's a really fun series. Definitely recommend it if you're into these types of books. One of the, I can't remember if she's one of the main characters or kind of more of a side character. But anyway, she's been in several of these books. But anyway, she's attacked and unable to speak. So they have to use this like new method to unlock her mind to be able to talk to her. So a couple of the main guys in the series are trying to track down the daughters and the pregnant girlfriend of one of these characters. Then the U.S. ambassador to Portugal is ambushed at a women's scientific symposium. The U.S. ambassador is murdered along with their colleagues. So the people behind this attack are kind of involved in this ancient sect that's like wanting to return the world to darkness and ignorance, it says, to when witches were burned at the stake. Our main characters are trying to stop this attack and like figure out what's actually going on. There's clues tracing back to the Spanish Inquisition, and especially the Malleus Maleficarum, so this Hammer of the Witches book. But yeah, so they're generally, you know, trying to rescue their loved ones and stop the enemy from unleashing this demonic power upon the world. This is a really fun series. I've really loved it all. I really enjoy how there's like this scientific aspect tied into kind of more supernatural sounding things, and there's just a lot of action. I really enjoyed the characters, so yeah, definitely a great installment of the Sigma Force series. So for favorite nonfiction, I only have one book to talk about here, and that's Educated by Tara Westover. So this is like her memoir, and she grows up in this like survivalist cult in Idaho, and like her parents essentially refuse to let her go to school, so she ends up applying to BYU without having graduated high school and gets in, and so she's like trying to just educate herself and, you know, escape this survivalist cult setting. So she ends up going to like Harvard and Cambridge after graduating from BYU. It was just like a very inspiring and touching story. Like the stuff that she had to go through as a child and just like throughout her life it's just really heartbreaking and just crazy to read about. Like some points in the book, it felt like I was actually reading fiction because it's like, there's no way this could actually happen. Oh my God. It's just unbelievable how she was able to escape this setting and educate herself and better herself. And it's just really wonderful. I definitely recommend picking this up. It's not like a boring memoir at all. It's very engaging. And like I said, you know, kind of reading like fiction. I just mean that in that it's not dry. It's not boring. You know, it's just very engaging and, I don't know, just kind of awe-inspiring, I would say. All right, so in my favorite comics or graphic novels category, I have Strange Planet by Nathan W. Pyle. So this is just like a really cute series of comics where we have aliens doing just like really silly, normal human things, but they like go about it and say it in a really silly manner. It's just so cute, and if you're looking for comics that'll cheer you up, like definitely pick this up for sure. The way they refer to things is pretty comical. Like, for instance, coffee is jitter liquid, a waffle is a crisscross flop disc, and yeah, that's just balloons are elastic breath traps. It's just really funny and adorable. I also follow him on Instagram, and it's just, I don't know, these comics are so cute. So the last category here in this video is going to be favorite horror, and this is exclusively held by Scott Thomas. So we have Kill Creek and Violet. In Kill Creek, there's this like house that has been abandoned. We have a group of horror writers who are invited to stay the night at this house as a publicity stunt. And things start to go bad, and they have to like fight for their survival. So it's kind of interesting, you know, having these different horror authors with these like wildly different personalities and different writing styles and everything. So the beginning kind of starts off slower, and you can kind of tell like something is maybe not right, and then just like really escalates and things get crazy and terrifying, and I just like could not stop reading. This is like more of like the haunted house type story. And then Violet, we've got our main character returning home to her like childhood lake house after her husband's death, and so she brings her daughter with her. But like something is not right in this town. There's like some mysterious disappearances, and at this house there's an old like imaginary friend is awaiting the return of this mother, and you know, bad things start to happen. So it's kind of the same sort of development where the beginning starts off a little slower and then just like really escalates from there. So between the two, I mean, obviously I loved both. They're just kind of different feels. Like this is more of a psychological horror, I would say, and this is, I don't know. So just different feels. given the choice between the two, I think I would probably say I preferred Kill Creek, but they're both good. I will say, and I did say this in my review for Violet, it is a much slower start than Kill Creek. And like, I mean, I did describe them both as having a slower start, but this doesn't really start off quite as slow as this. Like in Violet, we have scenes of them like cleaning up this house, and you know, I mean, I still read it very quickly, so I wasn't bothered by that. But I think that's like the main complaint that I see when it comes to Violet. Just, you know, people are kind of struggle, I guess, to get past this cleaning and slow aspect. But they're both really great, definitely creepy, wonderful horror. So I will definitely be picking up more Scott Thomas's books in the future. So there are all of my non-science fiction and fantasy favorites for 2019. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. Also, feel free to let me know what your favorite book in any of these genres that I mentioned was for 2019. I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.